The first time I encountered permadeath was standing in a parking lot with 400 people. I was assisting an adventure education facilitator along with a couple of friends. At the time, I thought I was pretty much the master of group facilitation with a couple dozen go-to games for large groups. This was my first foray, however, into a world that I didn't really know existed, commonly miscategorized as team-building games. Adventure education is an engaging and valuable set of actions and behaviors that enhance physical education and push character development and team cohesiveness. Like all categories of successful things, there's a range of quality, and unfortunately the stereotypical image being the one that's both least successful and the one that everyone knows, which is a bunch of corny, feel-good non-games followed by a rousing chorus of kumbaya. The reason that image exists is that this movement is very successful. It means that many institutions, including the YMCA I worked for, threw a ton of money at building ropes courses and buying various bizarre props that no one knew how to use unless they were trained specifically. And the money was also spent to train one or two facilitators with the idea that they would be able to train others, etc. As you can expect, over time, the ropes courses and the props outlasted the facilitators and the institutional knowledge. We've all kind of been in that situation before. And they'd still need to legitimize this investment, so adventure programs would continue with whoever was available. And that's why on a chilly October morning, I was standing in a parking lot with 400 middle school students and teachers. The game was simple. We had this wonderful rope. It's this retired climbing rope, and we were playing jump rope, but really large scale jump rope. The goal was to get everyone, all 400 people, from one side to the other. And there were a couple rules. Only one player may enter at a time. Each player had to jump over the rope once and only once. And once everyone started, you couldn't miss a single beat of the rope. That is to say, the stream could not be broken. And most importantly, if any player messes up in any way or touches the rope, the game is over, and everyone has to start all over. Yes, we were playing 400-player Flappy Bird. As facilitators, we were brutal. I'm a stickler for the rules. I have a 2-year-old, and she tries to cheat at sneaky squirrels, and I do not let her. So I've always been very brutal about that stuff. And about half hour into this, we had many of the teachers and students about to murder us. But then a breakthrough happened. And someone tried a new organizational technique because we weren't going to let them fail this. And they got over half the group through. And then they got more through. And then the positive momentum took hold. And by about 15 minutes later, they got 400 people through perfectly. There was this huge celebration, and everyone went crazy. It's hard to forget a moment like this if you're a new facilitator. My games didn't create that stress and release. They were never so daring to have such an intense fail rate. My games were light, and I thought they were fun, but it turns out they were kind of boring. As a build-up to this fantastic moment, we played all these other games I'd never even heard of. Star Wars, and Asteroids and Ankle Biters, and Tank. All different and all amazing. I was determined to learn all of them and actually become a master of facilitation, and it turned out that almost everything I encountered all came from one author. Karl Ronke is a pioneer in gaming. Humble and unknown to most, his contributions to the world of experiential education have and continue to echo through the hallways of schools and camps around the world. Karl's half-century of game creation is incredibly important. He sits upon a massive body of work documenting hundreds of live-action games and modifications of games through a dozen or so books. These collections are standards in the world of education, meaning that many people in this very room have played a Ronke game before, or more specifically, a game that Karl inspired, but we'll get to that in a little bit. The body of work includes games with many different props or no props, group sizes spanning from 1 to 200 or 500, and goals from light group starters to heavy trust builders. And that is just the game part of his tome. Karl is also responsible for most of the high and low rope elements that are found in adventure courses today, and the activities that surround them. If you've ever attempted the heebie-jeebie or pamper pole, you'll know what I'm talking about. One trick that Carl uses frequently is to hold a person or group's preconceived notion about their personal ability against them. We call this deception, right? But the good kind. Everyone in this room has experienced that in the world of video games. If you look at a level and you decide there's no possible way you can get through it, I think if you've played Super Meat Boy, you know what I'm talking about. Then little by little, you solve the puzzle, create muscle memory, and succeed. Imagine a 4x4 square platform sitting in the world about 6 inches off the ground. The game is called All Aboard. You and 19 other people need to stand on that and sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat without touching the ground. There are no loopholes, no tricks. There's no secret exploit. It's just a major challenge that appears impossible, becomes improbable, and then is solved. This style of play comes from a bond between the facilitator and the group. If the challenge appears impossible, what's the point in trying? A skilled facilitator will take the group from a place of trust, getting them to look past hesitation and embrace the impossible. The third reason that Carl is relevant to this audience is that he's a beacon of empowerment. As noted, he would motivate people to become participants. He would share new games and push them to do things they would never do. Push, of course, through sly suggestion. A session would start with the least motivated group, a group that could never not look cool, and end dancing around like chickens. That's just the kind of magic he performs. These games are not just about simple participation, though. The audience were co-facilitators, partners in crime. The group would leave with a shared understanding of the rules and the capability to teach these games to others, and that would be encouraged. When you're with Carl, he lets you know his process. He wants you to learn his tricks. There are no secrets to facilitation. It's all transparent. He's even transparent in purpose. This game is going to get you guys talking to each other. This game is about trust. Carl not only challenges the rules, he throws them away if they interfere. An exercise with Carl is an exercise in game modding. He explains the gameplay in such a way that it's a question. Should it be this way? Should we use a ball or a rubber chicken? And sometimes he simply introduces a mechanic. He isolates a moment of delight, then asks the group how to make that into a game. It's a constant collaboration that continues from group to group. He acts as a breadcrumb trail of game development, a stream that's been flowing for half a century. What's the process? I asked Carl for his rules in making games, and here's what I got. Rule number 1. Drink 2 cups of coffee before entering a sauna alone, then center your thoughts on what you need to create. Number 2, you are not creating the game for a pat on the back. Leave your ego at home. Great advice, although not necessarily for everyone. In New York, empty saunas are very difficult to come by. I believe that there are 3 keys to Carl's success, at least his early success, and 3 rules for creating new games that don't necessarily involve a sauna. Key number 1, the freedom to explore. Carl was never given restrictions around what he could do. He was simply given a high-level task, keep everyone having fun and engaged. There's something amazing about that. When do we ever just get an open invitation? Key number 2, the time to experiment, iterate, and improve. Carl had as much time as he wanted, and he would use that time to improve a game. There was never a hard deadline. Anything and everything was constantly in flux. Key number 3, the constant stream of active participants. Carl was competing with traditional physical education class in a time where all of the negative stereotypes that you ever have heard about in popular culture, medicine balls, dodgeballs, etc., were at their height. The audience loved the alternative, and it just so happened that his alternative was dripping with fun. Carl was aware that his work had purpose, something that was worthwhile to sustain a business, or 2 businesses, or 5. That is to say, he was intentional. Although I'm portraying his work as free and loose, that was merely his style. At the end of the day, there was change. More people participated. People left having new, unique experiences. On a daily basis, players were challenging themselves, and through these challenges, making measurable leaps in character development. The purpose of this work, according to his book, Cowtails and Cobras, to increase the participant's sense of personal confidence, to increase mutual support within a group, to develop an increased level of agility and physical coordination, to develop an increased joy in one's physical self and in being with others. I love that one. To develop an increased familiarity and identification with the natural world. Here are 3 pieces of advice that Carl does not give to game developers, but should based on how he works. Piece number 1, use what you've got. Number 2, don't get in the way of fun. Number 3, no game is ever finished. Use what you've got. Carl didn't necessarily plan what was going to happen in class. He looked around for inspiration. The basket at the bottom of the ski poles kept falling off. The piece kind of looked like a frisbee. It's actually up there in that picture. Instead of throwing them away, he threw them at the students. They responded by playing a keep-away-like game, and Asteroids and Ankle Biters was born in its most primitive form. Don't get in the way of fun. Carl watched the kids and helped push them in a good direction, but he didn't stop them. Some groups like to play outside the boundaries. Does that mean that the group suffers, or we should just remove the boundaries? No game is ever finished. Everyone here probably knows that, except we experience it through DLC and constant updates. Carl let games evolve with the groups. He let the context dictate the exact flavor of the rules, and the successful games live on. Asteroids and Ankle Biters is an incredibly popular and widespread game, nothing resembling Keep Away with ski pole baskets, though. It's worth experiencing these games because fun things are fun. Talking games, and this is something that we were listening to in the last presentation. Talking games is not talking board games or video games or field games. There are differences, sure, but at the end of the day, fun things are fun. And there are probably only a small number of things that are actually fun. We remix this handful of things in a million different ways, and sometimes digitally, sometimes not, and sometimes a mix. And Carl is a master remixer that shouldn't be ignored because his lack of digital, which brings us to the point, the real reason I'm here, which is to share a secret. Some folks know how great it feels when 400 people do the impossible in the real world. When that happens, it's electric. Every day, there are over 350,000 more people on this planet, and here we are making games that bury us in our palms or collaborate through wires. The future of play is not sitting alone in a room wearing a helmet. It involves eye contact and high fives. I'm not suggesting a non-digital future, instead a world where the best games include dozens of people in space, like 30-player Joust, or last year's Ranga, or Killer Queen Arcade. This intersection of digital and physical is the future. The indie world is becoming amazing at screens, but they're only halfway there. When you play a game with a dozen people in the same room, or 100 people, real people that you can see and smell and hear and touch, that takes a simple game session to a new place, a place where the impossible becomes improbable, and we all become human.